Yo, what's poppin', everyone? Welcome back to the Shuffle Squad. Zach Lesage speaking here. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 best decks, this week being the week of the Latin American International Championships. Certainly it should shake up this list going into next week, but if you're attending Latin American International Championships, League Cups, League Challenges, Locals, any kind of events, be sure to check this list out. If you're needing any of the cards for these decks, head over to... Hello, puppers. Head over to AtlasCollectibles.com, DecoGaming.ca, PTCGLstore.com for sealed singles and Pokemon TCG live codes. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you think. All of these decks are going to be available in the pinned comments. Again, I am in Brazil at the time of this video. I recorded a little bit earlier, so be sure to check those out. If I don't get to it, I will get to it when I'm back from my trip. That being said, let's jump into our number 10 pick. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. Kicking things off, we have Gholdengo. Now, Gholdengo is one of the new decks, and we've added it to our top 10 decks list, and I think that Gholdengo's kind of proven itself. I'm really liking the Rev of Room version of this deck so that we're able to kind of stabilize ourselves a little bit. If you're not a fan of the Rev of Room, maybe give it a try with Caesar. Now, this deck's going to try to draw cards with coin bonus, with Rev of Room's engine ability, and we're just going to try to draw cards, use Earthen Vessel, use Arven, grab the Superior Energy Retrievals, and rip our opponent in two with Make It Rain, similar to Baby Blacephalon. This deck is a little bit low on this list. I think it could actually rise up. Because while you might be like, yo, this is like worse Miraidon or worse Roaring Moon, because we're a turbo deck that's not necessarily getting to it, we do have the ability to scale our damage, which is great, and we can really scale it however we want to play, or whatever we run into. Also, if your opponent's playing a turbo deck and they attack into a Gimmighoul turn 1, they knocked out a 1-prizer, you can then evolve into a 2-prizer. So you do have a little bit of an element that you can control your opponent with there, and that's really where I see the benefit of this deck over other turbo decks from time to time. So Gholdengo's here. If you're a Gholdengo fan, hopefully you like it. Again, this is similar to Vinny Fernandez's list from Late Night, so shout out to them. Kicking it into number 9 is Mew VMAX Fusion Strike. Now, Mew VMAX has kind of been ripping it up. This is the deck that won the World Championships back in August, and here we are seeing it in the top 10 decks. Again, a little bit low on this list. I think this is the type of deck that could exist in the format, but when you got decks like Charizard and Roaring Moon, and people are still teching Drapion, I mean, I saw a handful of people teching Drapion in a wild amount of decks the other day at Late Night. It's one of those things where this is really like where a solid build for the deck is. If you hit that turn 1 Meloetta, you can compete with the turbo decks. It's still Mew, so you got that like half control element, half drawing cards with Genesect element. There's a lot of really cool things going on here. I don't think that there's too much that I'd change about this list. I think it's just a generally solid list. That's, again, I've been inspired by a lot. I forget, I think it might have been Chalo Zamorano, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that I took a lot of inspiration from. So if you're watching this and you're like, yo, Zach didn't give me, like, 100%, like, I've definitely taken inspiration from some online events lately. That's really what we have to go off of. I mean, right now, it looks like the late night events are the largest events that we've seen in this format before LAIC. So it's really interesting to see how these decks prepare and how a lot of these top players are preparing. But right now, this is the Mew deck that I'd go forward with if I was playing Fusion Strike. I think it's a really solid build. And I mean, you gotta dodge a few matchups. I think Mew has to dodge a handful, but we'll see how the metagame shapes up. Here we have Turbo Lost Zone Box at number 8. So I had Lost Zone Roaring Moon last week, and that was performing well. And I think right now we've seen Lost Zone Radzard. We haven't seen Lost Zone Kyogre, but Lost Zone Turbo is probably performing the most out of all the Lost Zone decks that aren't Tina. And I think that this is the list that I'd probably be going with going forward. I like the Counter Catcher. I like the Mew in the list. I like Dragonite, because Dragonite can hang with the Turbo decks where you're like, yeah, I'm going to turn 1 and rip you with the Dragonite V. 250, you're knocked out. Raikou still hits enough relevant weakness. And I mean, if you're playing Dragonite, you might as well play Raikou, and I think it's like you might as well play Mew. The deck gains some tricks, and I think it's cool with Counter Catcher. You're an aggressive deck, but you could also lay back and take some damage counters all at once. Maybe something would be cool with Technical Machine De-Evolution. We've seen that in a few other Lost Zone box lists, but right now, this is where Turbo is. So if you're a Turbo player, I think it's like fine. I feel like Lost Zone box is like generally mid, but it depends on the match that you hit. If you hit a bunch of Turbo decks, you're probably seeing a lot of success. If you don't really hit some Turbo decks, then you're probably struggling with Lost Zone Turbo. But I could easily see this deck like even like top 8ing the international championships. Like there's so much success with this deck, and there's really a reason not to run it. Chillin' at number 7 is Miraidon. I'm gonna go with the same list that I had last week. Now there are a couple cards that I might want to add in here. Like I think it's Zapdos Pogo might be good. Elekid might be more meme than dream. However, I do think it is good against Roaring Moon. Sometimes I think it could be good, and I think there's opportunities there. So I mean, I like this list. I think across the board, it's a very solid list. Starting like even if you're just not like if you're like, hey, I want to have a good Miraidon reference point, I think this is a great Miraidon reference point. And I think it's okay. I think this is like out of all the Turbo decks, this is kind of like one of the more mid-cop like versions. And maybe I'll change my mind and be like, yeah, you want to know what? I like this deck more than I like Roaring Moon. I could even be like, yeah, the format's shifted because of insert whatever reason I decide the night before LAIC and decide to play this. I mean, there's times where like I think like in previous weeks Single Strike Lugia didn't make my list, and then I'll go ahead and play it for Toronto Regionals because I think the metagame changes. Like it's even I'm doing these videos on a week by week basis, and some people are like, yo Zach, that's a little bit much. Like how much can the decks change? I'm like tinkering my decks by the minutes. Like sometimes I'm posting these decks and like 10 minutes afterwards I'm like, I am changing this card because I thought of something different, or I saw something the way that a tournament turned out, or anything else like that. So really consider it. There's a lot of things that can change here. And that's what it is. Again, I'm gonna give everyone a reminder to pick up cards from our sponsors. Like, I feel like I sound like a broken record when I'm making these videos, but our sponsors do make it possible for a lot of the Shuffle Squad members to travel or even have hotel stay or stuff like that. You might be like, yo, why do I care? Like, whatever. But if you want to see a lot of your favorite players playing in events, a lot of the content that we create for free, you have to buy cards anyways. So I know that DecoGaming.ca and AtlasCollectibles.com both have a large selection of Pokemon cards, singles, whatever you need. Pick up some Ultimate Guard sleeves from them while you're at it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that kind of thing. And if you need code cards online, go to PTCGLstore.com and use code TSS5. Patreon members even get a higher end discount. So if you want to support our Patreon and go to patreon.com/TSSwin, that does also help support us, and you get a better discount at some of our sponsors there too. So I will jump into number 6 and see what it is, but I did want to throw that out there. Breathing some hot fire at number 6 is Charizard EX. Now, I've gone back and forth on how I feel about Charizard EX, and I feel like the Technical Machine Evolution build solves more about the metagame right now. I personally like the Pidgeot build. I'm not sure how well I like that it's positioned in this format, especially with Chien-Pao and Lost Tina seeing success, but this version seems to have enough answers towards the metagame. And I think that this list is generally perfect in terms of like what we can have. So the Japanese list looks like it's doing well. We're going to be evolving our Zards with Technical Machine Evo. The thing that holds this deck from not being closer to number 1, and I think that this deck does have the possibility of being one of the best decks, is that you need a little bit of a wombo combo. That you need Technical Machine Evolution, Pokemon that you can evolve in play, energy. So basically, it's reading that you need Arvin to search for a Battle VIP pass and a Technical Machine Evolution, while also having a Fire Energy or a Jet Energy in your hand. It's a lot to ask for, but when it works, this deck is absolutely magical. Blocking your opponent at number 5 is going to be Snorlax Block Control. Now, this updated build of the deck includes Crabominable and Water Energy. I saw that it made top 4. I believe it was Trenton who made top 4 at this at the Late Night series. And I think that the Crabominable adds a lot. There's a lot of things in the list, like Lure Module, that were quite good in the deck. We have a lot of ways to just deck out our opponent in general. And I think that most builds are probably going to look like this or without the Crabominable. However, the Crabominable does give you hope if you run into a Snorlax mirror, so you actually have a win con against your opponent. So I think Block Lax is one of those things where like I actually think it's well positioned, best of 3. Comparatively, I know a lot of people are like, yo, it's just a best of 1 deck. It's because it's open deck list, stuff like that. Like, sure, you can see some success and you can definitely go down some things. A lot of people are just playing those stock deck lists. So if you know what's going on, research, like if you've researched the metagame enough and you understand what stock lists are looking like, I think that block lax can be quite effective in best of 3. So we'll see how this deck performs at LAIC, but I'm sure someone's going to take this or some other control deck all the way to the moon. Here we got it, Chien-Pao with Iron Hands at number 4. Absolutely one of the most destructive decks in our format. If it sets up, I think that this deck would be a little bit higher, and I thought it was going to be the best deck in format by far. It plays like that if you draw exceptionally well. If you draw like how this deck regularly draws, the deck can be a little bit more on the above mid side, where it's like you're always scrambling to get things done, and you don't always get all the pieces ready. I do think that it's possible to cut cross switchers from this deck, and I have seen some builds starting to do that, adding in Counter Catcher and maybe adding in some more consistency cards. However, at the cost of Escape Rope and Counter Catcher, I kind of like the cross switchers for what they're worth right now. So if you are playing Chien-Pao, I think that this is a very solid starting point for the list. If not, just a solid stock list of Chien-Pao Iron Hands to play at LAIC or any other events that you're playing this week. But yeah, Chien-Pao Iron Hands, it's the real deal. It just might struggle to set up. So if you have a poor matchup against this deck, sometimes it's just not going to work out. Psychic Embracing all the way to number 3 is Gardevoir. Now, this updated build of Gardevoir plays Screamtail, and what I saw at the Late Night series and I really liked was Luke Morsa, aka Celio's Network, Luxurious Cape in the deck. I think Luxurious Cape adds a lot to this deck, whether you need to kind of peak your Pokemon with higher HP so they can take Psychic Embrace damage, so you could attach more energy, or so that you could spread more damage with Screamtail. A lot of really cool things, and I mean, you don't even have to do it mid-game, you can do it at the very end of the game, so your opponent's not really getting the benefit of drawing an extra prize card. So the Luxurious Cape, I think, is probably going to be the biggest thing that we're going to be seeing in Gardevoir decks. Same thing with Professor Turo's scenario, so that you don't necessarily get locked out of things, or that you could just pick up things that you don't want to see in play anymore. Now we have opportunities to put Gardevoir in play, use Psychic Embrace, take it out of play so your opponent's truly playing against a single prize card deck. Does this deck get smoked by Iron Hands? Yes. I think there was only one deck on this list that played Iron Hands, and you're not going to run into Chien-Pao 9 rounds at a regionals or something like that, so keep that in mind. Ripping into our opponent at number 2 is Roaring Moon EX. Now, this is my most up-to-date build of the deck, and I think that we're getting pretty close to perfection when it comes down to it. I've done a lot of changes when it comes to Roaring Moon, such as cutting Lumineon, adding additional Morpeko, adding in the Minior, and even cutting some supporters. We've taken a very aggressive turbo build approach to it, but now we're able to use Radiant Greninja as early as turn 1 and rip our opponent's single prize card Pokemon to shreds, while also having free retreat. Squawkabilly is going to be pretty important at a 2 of. I mean, I could see us, again, cutting a Squawkabilly out of this deck, maybe for a Hisuian Heavy Ball. I could see us doing a lot of different things when it comes to this deck. I think it's always a work in progress, and this list can change, like I said, 10 minutes. I'm obsessive over it right now. But that's just because it's so new, and it's probably a deck that I need to explore. Like, as we continuously push the boundaries of new decks, this deck might become broken along the way. But right now, being able to turn 1 Calamity Storm or Frenzied Gouging, or turn 1 Radiant Greninja, or even using Mew EX turn 1, or having Minior to beat Block Lax. There's a lot of cool things that you could do with this deck, and I think that Roaring Moon is probably going to be a much bigger deal in our format than we think it is. But we'll see how it goes. LAIC is really going to be the proving point, the proving grounds of this deck and other decks in the format. But the big question is, what is our number 1 deck? Put your best guesses in the comments below. We'll find out soon enough. But if there's a certain deck here that you think has been omitted, maybe it's number 1. Probably is. But again, put those best guesses in the comments. Really helps boost the YouTube algorithm. And give this video a like while you're at it as well. Boom, here you have it. You have Lost Tina as your number 1 deck in formats. this deck has pretty favorable matchups across the board and can really compete with a lot of the turbo decks and formats. I've added a Spiritomb right now because Mew has been a sore spot for this deck for a while, but I could also see us adding in another Tina V just in case we run into an aggressive Miraidon or Roaring Moon deck. The combination of Roxanne plus Counter Catcher is not to be messed with. Like, this deck always wanted to play 2 supporters before, but you couldn't. Like, you can't use Colress and Boss on the same turn. So that's why some people played cross switchers, and that was a little bit inconsistent. But now we could just be like, yep, Roxanne, Path, Counter Catcher, you're also under Spiritomb, knock you out. Also, I use Lost Impact, so I'm going to have energies on my Pokemon still. Like, Tina can be an absolute tank, and I think that it's going to be a very strong pick for upcoming tournaments. It's tried, it's true, it's already successful, and it got a whole bunch better in this format. Really probably embodies the idea of Counter Catcher and the whole thing of coming from behind from the Paradox Rift when we got the reveals at Worlds last year. So I think this deck's going to be absolutely fantastic heading forward. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Let me close things out. And that's what we got going on for this video today. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video, learning more about the top 10 best decks, and I'd love to hear from some feedback from all of y'all. So if you want to let me know anything in the comments while you're there, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We are so close to 20,000 subs, and give this video a like. It does help boost the YouTube algorithm. If you need any cards, help support the Shuffle Squad by going to decogaming.ca, AtlasCollectibles.com, and PTCGL store. We have discount codes in the description, so be sure to click on those links, use those codes, all that great stuff. And if you want to even support the Shuffle Squad more, go to patreon.com/TSSWin to get access to our articles, deck lists, everything early, and just really support the squad, hang out. That being said, I will hopefully be seeing some success at LAIC. I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Hey trainers, tired of having too many cards lying around? I know that feeling, and I know what a hassle it is to try and sell those cards. But selling bulk is now easier than ever with TCG Bulk. Find tons of potential buyers in a single place. You just download the app, look for the best buyer near you, and carefully pack your bulk, ship it, and you get paid. It really is that simple. Turn the cards you don't want into the cards you absolutely need for your next deck. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.